Welcome back everyone. Time to do another late 2020 review of another device that I personally do like. I love this phone, and honestly, like I said before, I think this is probably one of the most, recommended iPhones that I could possibly do when it comes down to used devices. Now, obviously, if you have the money, get the newest one, but I think a phone like the iPhone 8 Plus is a device that is just so overlooked by so many people. When we look at, newer devices, especially budget devices, we tend to only look at, the 2020 or that year devices. So OnePlus Nord, Pixel 4a, iPhone SE2, those type of phones. But we don't really look at, the older devices. I don't really think a lot of people like buying used devices. And I think ever since the pandemic hit, a lot of people actually prefer buying new rather than used, which is very interesting. But a phone like the iPhone 8 Plus, which came out in 2017, really shows that if you don't have a lot of money, you can still pick up a very decent phone that really covers every single thing you need in a device at a much lower price tag. Now, even compared to an iPhone SE2 that came out this year, the iPhone 8 Plus in the used market is substantially cheaper in most cases than an iPhone SE2. And in my opinion, there's a lot of pros and cons for both devices, but the 8 Plus kind of does excel in some areas where the SE2 may not actually do so well in. Now, with the iPhone 8 Plus, you can pick them up, like I said, for less than $300, I think, in a lot of places, especially eBay. But I'll find the cheapest one on Amazon and link it down in the description below, so you can get it from there and help support the channel at the same time. Now, one thing that I still like about the iPhone 8 Plus that still holds up, that even, later on in 2020 is still amazing, is that panel. Now, I overhyped it right there. It's not amazing. It's definitely good, but it's still not perfect. It's an IPS panel. It's 5.5 inches and it's 1080p. Now, it's not, a 1440p OLED panel or anything, but I still think for a majority of people out there, you're probably going to be okay with this type of device. Now, you have True Tone on it too, and you have Force Touch on it, which is very interesting. Now, you do have a little bit of bezel on the top and bottom, but like I said, I think for a lot of people out there, they may be okay with it, especially when you're going out to this day and age where we're comparing a 2017 device to 2020. A lot of people understand that, it's okay because it was an older device, and Apple recycled this design kind of for the iPhone SE2, and that's another huge thing to keep in mind. Apple knows that a, huge sector of their demographic doesn't necessarily care about maybe a way their phone looks versus having great performance and a great price tag, and I think the iPhone SE2 really showed that. And even the iPhone XR and iPhone 11, it's not the best looking iPhone, it's a little bit bigger, it's a little bit chunkier, it doesn't have the best camera setup compared to the Pro models, but that price tag and performance is something that Apple does a really good job with. And the same thing with the SE2 is there, which is something that is really, really impressive. And even with the iPhone 8 Plus, it may look a little bit older, but it doesn't really, perform extremely slow, and it doesn't even look that bad if I'm being honest. Now, you do have the lightning port on the bottom, which is something I like, obviously. If you used USB Type-C, then obviously lightning port is here. And on the back, a glass back, which really adds to the flavor of this phone. I've had a lot of phones recently, including the Pixel 4a and the Galaxy S20 FE. Now, I don't want to group those phones together, but it's very interesting because the Galaxy S20 FE costs right now $699, which was about the same price where the iPhone 8 Plus came out, which was I think $799 or $749 when they came out. So that's another very interesting thing right there. And I can definitely tell you when it comes down to that glass back, I really do like it. The Galaxy S20 FE has a plastic back, which is very interesting. I don't know why they did that, but the iPhone 8 Plus still feels like a very premium flagship, which is really awesome. Now, on top of that glass back, you have a dual camera setup, which I actually think is this phone's one of its biggest factors for picking up still. I've seen a lot of phones come and go. I've seen a lot of single camera setups, dual, triple, quadruple camera setups. This iPhone 8 Plus, since the beginning, had a pretty good dual camera setup. It wasn't perfect, but it was definitely solid. Now, it's a 212 megapixel sensor, you have a wide angle lens, and then a telephoto lens. And like I stated before, it does a really good job. You can do 4K at 60. Now, it's not a perfect device. Obviously, you don't have an ultra wide sensor. You don't have any of the cool bells and whistles that maybe an iPhone 11 Pro or iPhone 12 will bring. But I still think for a majority of people out there, you're going to be okay. A lot of people aren't making full feature films from their device. They're just taking quick photos of their family and all that stuff. And I think a majority of people just don't really care too much about the quality of the photo. If it's good enough, then it's fine. I think a lot more people care about what's in the photos. If it's a photo of their family or whatever, I think a lot more people care about something like that. So that's a very important thing. But, I'll be honest, a majority of times that I use a phone camera, I'm usually using that front camera to, make Snapchats or like do FaceTime calls or whatever. Like I'm usually using that front camera, and this thing has that 7 megapixel sensor for the front as well. And like I stated, that's another huge asset for it. There's not really a lot of times where, you have to really depend on getting the best amount of photo, video quality, all that stuff. Even 4K at 30 is perfectly fine for a lot of people, but I feel like a lot of people, almost every single person I've ever met, still shoots all their videos at 1080p at 30 seconds. It's what stock comes with all the phones, they don't change it in the settings. I've never met anybody who goes up to 4K. And even photographers and even other YouTube people who film these videos, I don't know anybody who uses 4K. I still use 1080p at 30 on all my phone videos, so it is what it is. But I would definitely tell you, when it comes down to that camera setup, I think in 2020, even in the later part of 2020, it holds up extremely well. And what's really cool is we're still getting camera features even in the newest version of software. And this thing just got iOS 14, and we got some new camera features too in this, which is really cool. And we got some new photo app settings as well, which is another huge asset for this device. Now, with iOS 14, it's been definitely a bumpy ride across the board. It hasn't been perfect, but I think, over time, iOS 14 will definitely get better on the iPhone 8 Plus. So far, it's actually been pretty stable. I haven't had too many issues with it, but like I said, that doesn't mean across the board it's perfect or that it's, not going to have any problems. I definitely do think over time it's going to have some issues here and there, but I'll definitely tell you, I think the iPhone 8 Plus, for the most part, has been okay. Definitely not perfect, but definitely not horrible either. And I probably think that's the best way to put it. I think over time it'll probably get better. So in terms of software, that really pretty much covers it up. Now, performance wise, this is the area where I think the iPhone 8 Plus has definitely shined in the most early on this year. And I think even at this point right now, it still holds up extremely well in my opinion. Now, this thing, as a lot of you guys know, has that Apple A11 Bionic chip, Hex-core CPU, and 3 gigabytes of RAM on each of the 2 models that this thing was supported with. And like I stated, early on this year, the mid-review this year, and even this later part of 2020 review, I still think the performance is still one of its biggest assets. I think the camera, the build quality, and the performance is probably one of my favorite things about this device. Now, one thing I love about Apple is that all their devices, they may not be the fastest phones ever. They may not be, the craziest speed devices where you can play a ton of things and have them the crazy amount of RAM or whatever, but their devices are some of the smoothest device. I think they are the smoothest phones ever. If you look at a phone like an iPhone 8 Plus, I am getting a smoother experience from this device than I am getting on like a Pixel 4 or that I'm getting on a Galaxy S20 or whatever. I have such glitchy experiences on basically all my Android devices, and I hate saying that because I don't want to generalize a group of devices, but I don't know what it is with that software. I just have a glitchy experience across the board. Now, the 120 hertz really does help, but I still think that iPhone 8 Plus, even though it's over a 3-year-old device, it held up extremely well in the smoothness factor. Now, when I compare an iPhone 8 Plus to an iPhone 11, the iPhone 11 is the faster device. I think sometimes it was a little bit slower, surprisingly. I don't know why, but I think for a majority of the tasks out there, like an iPhone 8 Plus will definitely get you from point A to point B. I don't think there's going to be too many issues with it, and I think if you're in the market of getting a device, performance-wise on here, you're going to be fine. If you're doing Zoom calls, if you're doing, paperwork or whatever, if you're playing games, if you're doing whatever you need on a device, you're going to be okay with an iPhone 8 Plus. And like I stated, it's one of its biggest assets. It's definitely not the fastest device. Galaxy S20, iPhone 11 Pro, iPhone 12's coming out. Those are going to be the faster devices, but I still think the iPhone 8 Plus is perfectly fine for a majority of people in a performance standpoint. So that really pretty much covers it up in terms of the performance. Now, ending it off with the battery life, this thing has a 2,691 milliamp-hour battery. And like I stated earlier on, and like I'll state again here, I think the iPhone 8 Plus has a pretty above average battery. I think that's the best way to put it. It's definitely not amazing. It's not perfect. It's not, the greatest battery ever. But I think for, like I said before, a majority of things that you're going to do with it, it'll probably get you through a day at least. It's not going to get you through a month and, multiple days, most probably. But like I said before, I think for a majority of people out there, you're going to be okay with it. I wouldn't expect for you to, brag about this battery life, but depending on what you're doing, I think you're going to be okay. This thing also supports wireless charging, which is another really awesome thing. Of course, all phones have it now, but it's just another factor that kind of helps you kind of to have the longevity of this device, which is really good. There's a lot of phones like the iPhone 7s that don't have wireless charging, and a lot of other phones just out on the market don't have it either. So how I can sum up this video, and to kind kind of answer the question, does the iPhone 8 Plus, still hold up in the later part of 2020? Is it still worth it? And like I'll say again, I think the iPhone 8 Plus is pretty much worth it in the later part of 2020. And I might even say the same thing in 2021 unless iOS 14 totally ruins it. And here are the main reasons why I think this phone is still completely worth it in the later part of 2020. The build quality, like I stated, compared to a lot of other phones that is in this price tag right now in 2020, this is a very, it doesn't really get much better than this in a build quality standpoint. It has glass on the back. It doesn't feel cheap. Apple didn't cut any corners on this. And it was kind of like a flagship at the time, right under the iPhone 10. And the iPhone 10 was built almost the exact same way. So definitely when it comes down to the build quality, it's great. I think performance is still extremely smooth. It's not the fastest phone ever, but I don't think iOS 14 had a crazy impact on this phone's performance. And I think if you're going from day to day and you don't depend on, doing crazy multitasking and doing insane things all the time, I think you're going to be totally okay for this type of phone's performance, which is really, really important. Now, the third thing that I still like about this phone would definitely be the camera. I think this camera is still extremely good. Really, whatever you're going to do with it is going to be fine. You still have 4K at 60. You still have, a dual lens setup, which is really nice. And the camera photos and everything, it looks perfectly good. And even that front camera is perfectly fine. I don't think you're going to have too big of a problem for this, camera setup at all. And, I'll say an honorable mention. I think the battery life is, okay. I think it's not something to brag about, but I don't think it's a con either. Depending on how beat up that battery is, if it, has super bad battery health, then depending on that, it may have an issue. But if it's that full size or even above 90%, I think you're going to have a pretty decent battery life on this thing too. So that really pretty much covers it up for the most part. If you guys have any other questions or anything like that, let me know in the comment section below. Hit the like button, that would mean so much, but definitely hit that subscribe button. Every single subscriber that we get really does count, so it means so much if you guys get hit that. Also check out the other links down in the description as well. My Twitter, my Instagram, my second channel. More importantly than everything else, I love every single one of you guys. Hopefully I'll catch you guys in the next video. Peace out till then.